Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today for our fourth out of 5 modules. Today, our topic is going to be about cultural and religious considerations when working with Afghan clients. This webinar is presented to you by Switchboard, which is a one-stop resource hub for refugee service providers in the United States. My name is Medina Masumi, and I'm a training officer with Switchboard, and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's webinar. I'm also joined by my colleague Tigis Coleman. She's in the background supporting with the Zoom logistics. Today's session is going to be running for about 30 minutes as it has before. It is being recorded. You're going to receive an email with this entire slide deck and all this presentation with the recommended resources within the next 24 hours. This entire webinar will also be posted on Switchboard's website within 24 hours as well. We're going to go ahead and go over some Zoom logistics as we've done before. This is a webinar, so you're going to be on listen-only mode. You can switch from your computer to your phone if you wish to do so using the audio settings on the lower left side of your screen. The chat is going to be disabled due to the large size of this webinar. However, you will be able to chat with the panelists, just not the attendees, but go ahead and monitor the chat throughout the webinar because we are going to be dropping resources and different links throughout today's session. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A feature to ask them, and we encourage you to do so. You can also use the thumbs up icon to vote for another participant's question if you wish to. You can also turn on the closed caption feature as well if you desire. We are going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today. Again, we have Dr. Farid Saydee, who is an adjunct professor at the School of Curriculum and Teaching at Keene University. He's also the founder and president of Language Mentors International and is a native of Afghanistan. He speaks both Dari and Pashto languages. He's developed one of the strongest Dari and Pashto programs in the country and has extensive experience teaching the language and culture courses. Professor Saydee has also worked as a refugee service provider at the IRC in San Diego, and his roles have included resettlement case manager, job developer, and immigration case manager. We're also joined today by our own Switchboard's Malia Mirza. Malia is a training officer for Switchboard, focusing on case management. For 18 years, she's worked as a social worker with refugee populations in mental health and in hospital settings. Malia speaks 5 languages and holds a master's of social work from the University of Washington. We're going to go ahead and review our learning objectives for today. Hopefully by the end of this webinar, you guys are going to have an understanding of common social, cultural, and religious characteristics among Afghans. And also we're going to give you some knowledge of trauma-informed approaches to foster greater trust when you're working with Afghan newcomers. And to start you guys off, as we always have, if you could just go ahead and answer this question of how would you rate your knowledge of Afghan culture and religion? And if you can go to slido.com and enter the code, or you can scan the QR code. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to go ahead and answer that question for us. I'm not sure if our Slido is working. It might be giving us some trouble here because I'm not seeing any answers come through. Let me give it a few more seconds here. Yes, I think it's not working. Our Slido is not working. So I apologize for that. It's glitching. There was an update to Slido right before we started our presentation, and that could be the reason why. So that's okay. We'll just go ahead and move on to that. I see people answering in the chat. Some knowledge of Afghan culture. Yeah, some knowledge. Yeah, I'm sorry that the Slido is not working. A lot of people are saying some knowledge of Afghan culture. Hopefully by the end of today's webinar, you guys will have a lot more. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Malia to go ahead and start talking to you guys about basic tips for cultural awareness.
Thank you, Medina. Let's talk about some social and cultural customs among Afghans. Before we do this, keep in mind that cultural awareness does not mean you know everything. It's impossible to know everything about a particular culture. Instead, you should attempt to allow individuals to explore their feelings, beliefs, and behaviors, working through challenging and identify aspects of their life that they would like to talk about. Ask good questions and be mindful and respectful. An example, there is often an incorrect assumption that clients from Afghanistan, especially special immigrant visas, speak English. The Afghan situation is complex and there are many uncertainties. Many people are responding with uncertainties. If your role involves providing ongoing support to Afghan clients, you should need to respectfully ask questions and conduct an assessment to find out more about race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, social class, and disabilities. Focus on learning and keep an open mind. Keep in mind that cultural awareness does not mean you know everything. Be open-minded and become a good listener. When we are an active listener, we are offering undivided attention. Next slide, please. So in here, we're going to talk about religion in Afghanistan. Afghanistan may be considered one of the most Islamic countries in the world. Nearly 99.7% of Afghans in Afghanistan are estimated to be Muslim, and the religion underlies many of the country customs and tribal codes. Islam, along with those customs and tribal codes, determine the rule by which Afghan lives. Afghanistan religious divide is not between district religions, but it is between Muslims themselves. Muslims are divided into two major groups in Afghanistan, Sunni and Shia. Muslims follow the 5 pillars of Islam, which include the belief in God, in His Prophet, the 5 times prayer, fasting during month of Ramadan, charity, and the pilgrimage. In regard to diet, alcohol and pork are strictly prohibited. Also, Muslims would only eat meat that is considered to be halal or zibah. It's known as permissible meat that follows by Islamic law. Modesty in clothing and physical appearances is expected for both Muslim women and men. Observant Muslim women wear a hijab or head covering in public. The hijab can vary in level of modesty. Some women fully cover their hair and neck, while others choose to leave part of their hair visible. Currently in Afghanistan, women are expected to fully cover their body. Muslim men must also observe modestly by covering the skin from their navel to their knee. Many Muslim men will wear a beard, which is especially popular among Afghans. It's important to note prior to Taliban entering Afghanistan, women were not forced to wear hijab. Even in the United States, you will notice that there are many Muslim women who observe the religion and choose to not wear hijab. In our next slide, we're going to talk about religion and culture holidays in Afghanistan. So next, please. Thank you. Eid al-Fitr is a holiday celebrated by Muslims that involve shared prayers and joyful meals with friends and family. Eid al-Fitr lasts 3 days and sometimes referred by other names like Eid al-Ramazan. Eid al-Adha dedicates the season of pilgrimage to Mecca. Eid al-Adha is famously known for the tradition and slaying of sheep and divided among relatives and foes. Ashura is the 10th of Muharram or Martyrs' Day is celebrated by both Sunni and Shia Muslims. However, it's mostly celebrated by Shia Muslims. And Nowruz is solid now and is the first day of Afghan New Year and marks the first day of spring. This year, the Taliban has banned any public celebration of the Nowruz holiday, much like they had during their previous reigns from 1996 to 2001. They claim that the festival does not align with Islamic law, and also it's a pagan holiday, and there is no place in Islamic Republic. The Gul Surkhi Festival, which directly translates to Red Flower Festival, is primarily celebrated in northern Afghanistan, Mazar-e-Sharif. During the first 40 days of New Year, people from all over Afghanistan travel to see the red tulip flowers that have bloomed through the green plains and hills surrounded in the city. And now I would like to pass on to Dr. Saeed.
Thank you, Maliha. We know that integration into new communities for all immigrants, especially for Afghans, especially for this group of Afghan evacuees from Afghanistan, is extremely difficult. They feel alienated, homesick, sometimes they feel powerless, but there are some things that we can do at least to reduce some of these tensions or problems, and also facilitate their integration into the culture. Like Maliha mentioned, religious activities or religion has a special part in Afghans' life, so we can provide some information regarding local mosque to Afghans. I'm not talking about Afghan mosques, but in general, any mosque that the Muslim communities have prepared, and they go there and participate. And also, if there are in big cities, of course, so there are Afghan communities. So if we can connect them to communities, that community will help them to integrate them into the culture. Again, I'm not talking about only Afghan communities, but there are also other communities, Muslim communities, also the communities of our in Afghanistan, regional countries like Pakistanis, Iranians, Middle Eastern countries, and even Indian countries, because these people, they have a lot in common, and that makes it a little bit easier for Afghans to go and have something in common with them, and then if there is any need, then they can just get their needs, just get some help from them. And also make sure that you introduce some markets that sell halal food and also familiar cooking ingredients, because that's important for Afghans to feel comfortable when it comes to eating. Another important thing is that as case managers and service providers, we should remain sensitive to Afghan social, culture, religious, and religious boundaries. It's okay to explain, or it's important to explain the American cultural norms, but in the meantime, we should also make sure that we tell them that they should feel confident that no one will attack them, no one will disrespect, and all their boundaries. For example, when it comes to the choice of clothing or the diet that they follow, will be respected by other people. We should also be aware of the mental health and trauma they have gone through, and we will talk about trauma a little bit more in detail in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Remember that in Afghanistan, because of decades of war, poverty, and political instability, have turned Afghanistan into kind of like a trauma state. It is recurring. It has been embedded into Afghan culture and Afghan normal life. just an example, for example, apart from all those years of instability and infighting and war and all those things, just remember the last 2 weeks of August last year at Kabul airport, the chaos and the trauma that we went through. I'm sure that you already know about that. So those memories will stay in their minds, and it's not easy to forget about those bad days and the chaos and the trauma that they experienced. And also, when they come here, displacement and struggles that they face and experience that also increase psychological trauma, particularly PTSD among Afghans. Just like every immigrant communities, Afghans have pre-immigration stressor and also post. The pre-stressor can include initial displacement. They leave their country, their loved ones, and they have lost their property and wealth. And believe it or not, that some of them they have left Afghanistan just with small backpack, and some of them they had good jobs and they left their jobs. They had to leave their jobs and their property and wealth and leave the country. Disappearance of family members is also among them. And I heard, I think it was last week that I heard that about 300 children are still waiting to be reunited with their family. So just imagine the trauma and the stress and depression that they get from that. And also domestic violence that they have experienced, and also all the oppressions by religious extremists. When they come here in the United States and they get resettled, they face post-migration stressor, like social isolation and discrimination. I don't say that they get discriminated, but they may feel discriminated. They may not have the access to resources, or they may have poor access to resources. Again, I'm not saying that the resources are not there. There might be resources, but they may not have access because of a lot of reasons. Maybe because of lack of knowledge, or maybe the community doesn't offer that resources, or maybe they don't have the means to go and access those resources. So they may feel discriminated. Sometimes it's hard for them to find the jobs that they want. And that's another issue, because this group of immigrants or evacuees, they don't receive the type of services that the regular refugees receive. So that's why they have to work. And most of the time, I think they have to both couples needs to work, or maybe full-time jobs in order to survive financially. Legal issues, that's another important and a big concern among Afghan evacuees. When I spoke with some families, they were really concerned about their legal status. They told me that they were not sure what would happen to them after the 2 years initial stay in the United States will expire. They were not sure whether they will stay in this country or they will be sent back to Afghanistan. If they stay in this country, would they be on the path to citizenship? So a lot of concerns in that area. Language proficiency, like Maliha mentioned, they come from all walks of life. Some of them, they can communicate in English, but most of them, they don't have that proficiency in English. So that's why that makes it hard for them to job. So they need kind of like a English for a specific purpose in order to prepare them for job and for employment. Next slide, please. So when we deal with them, we already know that they have been experienced trauma, depression, stress, and all those things. There are some things that we can do to at least reduce the level of trauma. When we meet with the clients, I think it is important that we directly talk with the client, with Afghan families, and not through the interpreters. Of course, the interpreter will be there, but we need to directly communicate with the clients and acknowledge their presence and look at them and listen to them. And also important point is that we need to set clear expectations about services. We should not overpromise things, and that will help to develop a trust between the parties. We also need to use a client-oriented approach, and before offering any suggestions, we need to ask them whether they understand the issue and how they might want the issue to be resolved. So kind of like solving problems using their perspective. And also when we talk with families, it is important that we should respect the role of parents based on the culture. Of course, as long as it is not harmful to children. Avoid stereotypes. Maliha mentioned before, we should not generalize things that Afghan males fall in this category and women fall in this category. So we need to deal with families, with individuals on individual basis, and kind of like do not put them in categories and generalize things. And another important point is about communication, that Afghans used to use a lot of nonverbal communication using body language. So Afghan, as we already talked, Afghan use mostly indirectly. So indirect communication, verbal communication, and nonverbal communication is kind of like a carrying the weight of communication. So that's why it's important that we observe those nonverbal clues and body language. For example, eye contact. When they do not look at you when you speak, it doesn't mean that they don't listen. That's why it's very important that we should observe that. And also, I think it is important to listen to their stories when they want to share their stories, their experiences. But we should not probe them for details unless it's absolutely necessary, maybe if we need it for a course of treatment. So these are some tips. And now back to you, Medina.
Thank you so much, Farid and Malia, for all that wonderful information. And there's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. We do have just a few minutes for questions. If you guys have some, you can go ahead and take this opportunity to type it in the Q&A. I did flag one question, Farid. I think this is a really good question that a lot of people might be curious about. And it says, how do Afghan refugees talk about the differences between Taliban application of Islam and their own?
Well, they believe that what the Taliban is doing is not representative of Islam or Muslims' behavior. Most people believe that they are just like a project to defame Islam and Islamic practices, because their practices are not supported by verses from Quran or from the Hadith of Prophet Muhammad.
All right, thank you for answering that. Yeah, I think you guys will find that most of the Afghans, as you said, Farid, that are coming here are going to have a very clear and very defined, difference of how they practice faith between themselves and the Taliban. Is there a recording? Lisa, to answer your question, I'm sorry that you joined late. Yes, you will get this recording within the next 24 hours. So you will get that into your email. There's another question. It says, are there large regional or national resources for helping Afghans here on SIVs navigate the legal and immigration system? So this question is from Sarah. Farid, I don't know if that's something you can answer.
Well, from my experiences, that resettlement agencies like IRC and Catholic Charity, they have a group of immigrants, part of a non-profit organization that can help, but it's a good question for IRC, I think.
Okay. And then let's see, I'm checking the time. We have time for one more question. Are there significant differences or potential problem areas between recently arrived Afghan refugees and any of the Muslim American groups who are already here in the US?
Well, as part of religion, I don't think that there is a problem, but cultural wise, yes, because I have seen that the people who live in the United States, they're a little bit more open-minded compared to those people who are coming from Afghanistan. I remember that
we could say they're integrated, right? They're
integrated,
yeah.
correct? Yes, integrated.
So I think that's going to be one of the biggest difference. But again, with practicing religion, it's one of those things that, you know, there's like a wide spectrum of where people lie into their, you know, preferences of what they practice. There was a comment made earlier that I saw about, I think it was Arizona State University. There's 67 Afghan women who have joined. Pam was the one who shared this comment, and out of 67, only 2 wear a headscarf, and she was wondering if it had to do with you know, a generational difference. She also mentioned that they were all from the Hazara tribe, and I don't think it really has to do generational. I just think it depends on the individual's you know, practice, their own sort of religious practices. I don't think that just because one person comes from one generation versus another, that it means that they wouldn't wear a headscarf. That's my opinion, I guess, on that. I think that's all the time we have today for questions. If you guys have any lingering questions, you can always reach out to us. If we can go ahead and proceed to the next slide. We will send you guys all these wonderful resources again within the next 24 hours. So if you want to learn any more information about anything, we'll go ahead and send you these in our slide deck. Here's our learning objective for today. We hope that this webinar taught you guys a little bit more about religious and cultural considerations when working with Afghan clients, especially newcomers. We encourage you all to stay connected with us for any future trainings or resources that you might find helpful. And if you guys are part of our certificate course today, please make sure to check your email for the link to join that. Please, once again, we do have a survey for our course for today for our webinar. If you guys can just take a quick minute to do the survey, it's also going to be dropped into the chat. Yes, it already has. And that is all we have for you today. And next week will be our 5th and our last webinar for our culture course. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.